Okay, so a court of law determined that Josh, who borrowed a parcel of land from James, would be granted a blank. This was due to the fact that the land Josh just purchased has no access except over the land of James. Now think about it. He's stuck back there. He can't get out unless he uses James's driveway. Okay, so, or excuse me, yeah, was it James? Yeah, James's driveway. So if he's got to use James's driveway to get out, what's that sound like? He's giving him an easement, right?
Easement.
So
Yeah.
he has that easement, right? And it's by necessity because otherwise he's stuck back there. He can't get out. He's stuck in the back there forever. He just got starved to death back there. But now there's some other words on here too. The easement and gross. Remember, the easement and gross is like it's benefiting another. It's not benefiting another piece of land like this one is, where we got one piece of land that needs to use the other one to get out. The easement and gross is benefiting usually a company. Like, for example, like the utility company. It's not benefiting another piece of land. Like in my backyard, I've got a utility pole, a telephone pole. They have an easement to put that telephone pole there. Okay. And because otherwise they couldn't get back there to work on it. And if I said, no, I don't want the telephone pole in my backyard, they're going to tell me too bad because it's for the public good. So that's the difference between the easement by necessity, where I have to have it, and the easement and gross, where the utility company has to have it. Also, if I had a railroad track in my backyard, that would be an easement and gross. If like I had a big, farm or something and they put a railroad track across it. If I say no to that, they're going to do it anyway, because if I don't let somebody cross over and get there, then the railroad can't keep running, right? So I can't just block progress. Okay. Then also adverse possession. Remember, adverse possession, there's adversity there, right? I am coming in, and this is kind of a crazy one. I am getting a title. I'm getting title to your property by stealing it, basically. So you walk off and abandon a house, and you're just like, okay, I've abandoned this property, and I see that you're not coming back, and I just move in and I start taking care of it. I pay the taxes on it. I mow the grass. I keep the yard up. I keep the house up. I live there like I own the place. And you can see me do it. If you checked on the house, you would see me there and you could tell me to leave. But if you don't, and that keeps going on and on and on and on, after a certain number of years, depending on which state you're in, then the courts would say, well, look, you've been taking care of this property. We're going to give it to you if you ask for it. And that I would get the deed to the house, because otherwise it would just been abandoned and just sit there and rot. So that's called adverse possession. Okay. So that's the first one. Let's see. A trade fixture is which one of these?
Trade fixtures. I want to say personal property.
Right. Because most of the time a fixture is part of the property. It becomes part of the real estate. That's why we call it a fixture, right? So most of the time a fixture would be like, if I hung up a curtain rod and I screwed it into the wall, right? It goes from being personal property to, it goes from being personal property to real estate. But the reason why a trade fixture is personal property is different, because the trade fixture is part of my trade. If I'm a hairdresser and I bring my salon chair and I put it in the salon while I'm working there, while I'm renting that commercial space, when I leave, I can take that with me. So it's a unique kind of fixture, because most fixtures would be real estate, but a trade fixture is special because it goes with me when I leave. And I mean, if I tear up the floor, put it in, I've got to repair that damage that I did, just like any other tenant would. But I get to take it with me when I'm gone because it's a trade fixture. Okay, so remember with fixtures too, the idea is that we have to figure out why it's there, right? What's the intention of the person who put it there? Do they mean for it to become part of the real estate? Is it going to mess anything up by taking it out? That sort of thing. So that helps us to determine it. The intention of the person, how well it's affixed, is it meant to be permanent? So the local zoning ordinances call for all properties in a residential neighborhood to be built at least 30 feet from the road front. Okay. Remember this one? There's two of these people always get mixed up.
That, let me see, that is,
Government record or the buffer zone.
Yes, this one is going to be the setback. Now, but you're close on that because you said buffer zone though, right? Because a lot of times people say buffer zone because they're really close, but remember the difference between the two. The setback is how far I have to be set back from the road. You know, when you drive through a neighborhood and everybody's not like right, well, unless you're in an older neighborhood where it's downtown and there's not much yard space to build on. But if you drive through a neighborhood and every house is at least, you know, certain ways back from the road, that's because it's a setback requirements of that neighborhood or that area. And so I'm not allowed to build right on top of the street. Also, I'm not allowed to build right on top of my neighbor. I've got to leave a little bit of buffer space. Now, a buffer zone is like that, but here's the difference. A buffer zone, excuse me, we put that buffer zone in what's transitioning between commercial space and residential. So like, you know, sometimes you'll see like a Walmart or a Target or whatever, and it's right up against a neighborhood. That green space, they always have some green space between the Target parking lot and the houses because nobody wants Walmart in their backyard, right? So it's kind of that transition zone between the two different types of properties. That's the buffer zone. Okay. And then the next one, a bank has foreclosed on a property and now it owns it. We hope we don't see a bunch of this again, but it's possible. So the thing is that let me close this out. I just want to make sure nobody was trying to come in on us. So if it's an REO property, that's our slang term, our abbreviation for which one, and that is real estate owned by the bank. So if it's foreclosure property, this one, you better remember, because unfortunately, somebody's eventually going to ask you about it because somebody's going to lose their house. And then another person's going to want to go see it. And we call that REO, real estate owned. Everybody wants those because they think it's a deal, right? So the right of the government to make reasonable rules for the use of land is the right of what?
Would be the
Your
tax
authority.
restriction.
This one's the police power, right? The police power. Now think of it like this. When we're talking about police power, what we're talking about there is not the literal police, right? It's the way the government can tell us what to do with our private property. Like I own my property, you know, I can use it how I want. However, if I decide that I want to go and I want to build a skyscraper in my backyard, the city's going to be like, no, we don't think so, right? Because there's zoning rules, there's building codes. I can't just do anything I want. So I'm allowed to do certain things, but I can't get crazy with it. So zoning, building codes, all those sorts of things are police powers. They're the government restricting what my free will is on my property, what I can do with my property. Now, another thing that's on here is a deed restriction. That is a deed restriction is a little bit different. That's not the government telling me what to do. That's a prior owner or the builder or the developer of my neighborhood telling me what to do, right? So, excuse me, if there's a deed restriction that says that I'm never allowed to paint my house any color, but like in Columbus, they've got neighborhoods where they're like those Victorian houses, those big fancy older houses. They have certain neighborhoods have deed restrictions that say they have to be painted certain historical era, like of that era, Victorian era colors, like pinks
What
and
about
blues and
for HOAs?
yeah. So an HOA could be that too. It could be so they call it CC&Rs, covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Yeah. If I have an HOA, they can pass rules on me. That's another private control. Mm-hmm. That's a good example. Yeah. Remember what pirater V is? I guess I'm saying it right. I never know if I'm saying it right. Pirater V, that's for the life of another. Remember what that has to do with? You guys remember that one? That was the life estate. So let's say you guys are my sisters and I live in Michigan and you guys live here. And I was like, listen, mom's really sick. She needs you to take care of her. I've got this house there in Cincinnati. And I need you to go move in there and take care of our mom. And as long as mom's alive, you can have a life estate. You can own that property for as long as mom's alive. But when she passes, then it reverts back to me. It comes back to me, and you got to move on down the road. So basically, you're giving somebody ownership of a property as long as this other person's alive. And then when they pass away, something else is going to happen with the property, but that person won't keep the ownership. Now that's when it's based on somebody else's life, which is kind of unique. That's the pure attribute when it's because it's based on mom's life. But what if you're my sister and I decide I'm going to give you this property, but I want the property to go on to my other cousin when you pass away? I could give you a life estate saying, okay, Dominique, you can live here as long as you're alive, but then when you pass away, it goes on to our cousin Bob. Okay, so as long as you're alive, you have ownership of the property, but the minute you pass, then the ownership passes on to Bob. You can't leave it in your will to somebody else. You can't change my mind on it. Whatever I said goes at the end. Okay, if it comes back, that's called, Bob would be called the remainderman because he gets what's remaining. Now, if I said, okay, Dominique, you can live here as long as you're alive, but then when you pass away, it comes back to me, because I'm the one who originally gave it to you, that's called a reversionary interest. It's going to revert back to me, come back to me. Okay.